This is the Canadian tribute to human rights. In high school, I used to pass it every day on the bus, and it's kind of a fixture of Elgin Street, so honestly, there were days when I barely noticed it anymore. In those years of passing by, I had never asked myself where this monument came from, and when and why. I had never stopped to take it in. But in the past few years, I've become fascinated with human rights. I took time to read the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and I ordered a free copy of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, things I highly recommend, by the way. Deepening my understanding of the inherent dignity and equal and inalienable rights every human has was eye-opening. But it also forced me to ask the tough philosophical questions like, where do these rights come from?
Through that process, it became clear to me that human rights can be affirmed by laws, like they are in Canada, but ultimately they don't rely on laws to exist because the dignity that we have is inherent. And human rights can be upheld by human societies, but would and should still apply even if every human culture disregards them, because our rights are inalienable. As a confident follower of Jesus, I believe, like Jesus did, that every human has value. And on what basis? On the basis that every human was made by God and in the image of God. As a result, to me, the monument became a resolute symbol of good and beautiful and true values that I believe in, until recently, when it became even more.
The former officer who knelt on George Floyd's neck has now been arrested.
Two separate autopsies have come to the same conclusion now, that George Floyd's death can be classified as a homicide.
Sparked by the unjust death of George Floyd in the U.S. and a long history of police brutality, a peaceful protest was recently organized by No Peace Until Justice to march in solidarity against police brutality toward minority groups. And I decided to go. The march started at Parliament Hill, made its way through downtown Ottawa, and it ended at the Human Rights Tribute. And that day woke me up and really changed my perspective. But to help you understand why, first I have to take us back about 85 years.
In 1935, at the annual meeting of the Nazi Party in Nuremberg, Hitler passed the Nuremberg Laws. Laws created to protect German blood from the perceived defilement of Jewish citizens. These laws laid out detailed guidelines for the tracking of blood purity and restricted the intermarrying of Jewish and non-Jewish Germans. The intentional removal of legal rights and citizenship from Germany's Jewish population was a big step forward in dealing with what the Nazis called the Jewish problem. The societal and now completely legal oppression of German Jews and minorities led to the persistent and gruesome atrocities for which the Second World War is now infamous. After Germany surrendered in 1945, high-ranking Nazi officials like Hermann Göring were tried in Nuremberg for crimes against peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. It was concluded that the defense of these officers, that they were just following orders, did not absolve them of their moral obligation to the intrinsic and inalienable value of all human beings, regardless of their orders. On December 10th, 1948, out of resolve to never have the events of the Second World War repeated, the UN General Assembly adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which later informed the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
Human history is peppered with instances of abuses leading to rights being codified in different times and in different places. But digging a little deeper surfaces the reoccurring pattern that those rights are not applied the same way to women as they are to men, or to different social groups or religious groups or races, and on it goes. You would think that a simple statement like human rights apply to all humans would be pretty straightforward, but the sad truth is that humans have spent their whole history dehumanizing each other.
It's not surprising that Leopold referred to the Congolese as monkeys. It's not surprising that the Nazis referred to the Jews as rats. It's not surprising that the Hutu referred to the Tutsis as cockroaches and snakes. It's not surprising that in World War II, the Japanese called the Chinese insects and the Americans called the Japanese monkeys. It's not surprising that when the conquistadors came to the Americas, that they referred to the Native Americans as talking animals and soulless parrots. And it's not surprising that it led to the barbarism that we have seen over and over again in history.
Dr. Steiger argues that people don't kill people. And by that, of course, he doesn't mean literally. We all know that there are murderers. But what he's saying is that when one group of people declares that another group doesn't count as people, worthy of dignity and value, there you will find oppression and enslavement and genocide. I can and have been blissfully ignorant of how human rights are still being violated today because of my assumptions, like my assumption that the way that I experience the world must be how others experience it too. Recently, it's become all too clear that brothers and sisters in my country and in my city are still fighting for the dignity and value I believe they have, but just assumed that they were experiencing day to day. L. Russ Bush's book, The Advancement, describes how some worldviews see human history as advancing inevitably towards its destiny. That destiny being something like a perfect world or a futuristic utopia like what we see in the movies. And as a culture, I don't think we ever really come right out and say that, but I think that rapid advancements in technology and medicine and education can make us think that way. It's tempting to think that because some things are getting better, that must mean that everything is getting better. But history teaches us a much different story. On the one hand, our deepening commitment to the good and the true and the beautiful can bring about a world of freedom, justice, and peace. But on the other hand, the corruption of our hearts and systemic problems can lead to the demeaning of people as less valuable, less dignified, and less than truly human.
The Canadian tribute to human rights was designed by Montreal artist Melvin Charney. On September 30th, 1990, his sculpture was officially unveiled by the Dalai Lama. And this tribute was intended to be more than a philosophical signpost declaring the value of every human life. From the beginning, it was meant to inspire people like you and me to join humanity's ongoing struggle to obtain and preserve fundamental human rights for all. A struggle which is still going on today. As I developed a deeper understanding of this monument, I felt like I had to see it again and take it in as more than just a symbol of what I believe about the God-given value of each human being.
I want to live in a world where human dignity and value is applied without question, but I actually live in a world where human rights need to be fought for every single day. This has just been a small part of my story as I learn to care.